Welcome, folks, to our Committee of the Whole operations for Tuesday, March the 4th. If you join me, if you're able to rise while I read you the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use our power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. We acknowledge that we meet on the historic territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We respect and continue the long-standing relationships with Six Nations of the Grand River and Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize our responsibility to use and take care of these lands while remembering the generations past and considering the generations yet to come. We remember those who came to this land from the British Empire, from America, to build new lives and build a new country called Canada. We remember those who cleared and farmed these lands, and those who built the roads and the mills and the factories, and those who built the houses and schools for the good of us all. Please be seated. We have the roll call.
Roll has been taken.
Okay. Declarations of conflicts of interest, folks. Well, I have one. It's item 6.1.3. It's because I live in proximity to the street, which is at issue here. And for that item, Mayor Davis will take the chair. We don't seem to have any delegations tonight. We don't have any presentations. We do have a presentation. We have Gagan Batra. But firstly, we're going to go to separations of items for discussion. Are there separations, folks? Councillor Caputo, what have you got?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Day.
I'm actually the chair.
Mr. Mayor of the month, I said.
Okay, thank you.
6.1.3 Balmoral.
Separated, yes. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. 6.1.7 Brantford Airport Board Report.
Mayor Davis. The rest?
Yes, Chair McCreary. 6.2.1 and 6.2.2.
Thank you for that, Mayor. Now, do I have a mover and seconder? Do I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Sullivan, there you are. Could you move this and tell us who your seconder is, please?
As soon as it comes up on the screen. That all items contained written consideration consent 6.1 to 6.2 not separated for discussion purposes be approved. Stated seconded by Councillor Sicoli.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. All those items that are subject to the vote are item 6.1.2, amending on-street parking regulations policy update, 6.1.4, housekeeping, traffic, and parking bylaw amendments, 6.1.5, new traffic regulations policy, 6.1.6, traffic bylaw, 3783, truck route amendments, and 6.2.3, the minutes. Thank you. All items not separated for discussion purposes carried unanimously on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councillor Sicoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Celeste, Martin, McCreary, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Samwa.
Thank you for that. So we're now at presentations. Gagan, would you like to proceed? You have 10 minutes to speak to item 6.1.1, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Addendum.
Thank you, Chair McCreary. Thanks everyone for having us tonight. My name is Gagan Batra. I'm the Manager of Business Support and Sustainability with Public Works. And I have along here with me some staff who helped to prepare this report and presentation, as well as our consultant from Optimus SBR. So the agenda for tonight's presentation is on the screen here. We're going to go into some background and an introduction to the project. We're going to talk about the progress to the current Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as well as some of the research that went into the development of the addendum. I'm going to talk about the recommendations in not overly specific detail because it's in the report, but I will go over some of those key recommendations from this plan, as well as the next steps. So first up, why is a Parks and Recreation Master Plan addendum needed? There are several reasons. Number one is responding to changes from policy and legislation at the provincial level. So Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, was a bill that was introduced in 2022 and has a significant impact on the parkland dedication, which impacts Parks and Recreation budget and parkland allocation. Number two is addressing the anticipated growth in the city from newly acquired lands. And because our population is growing more rapidly than we had initially thought when the original plan was adopted. We're trying to achieve strategic alignment. So rather than having a list of many capital projects in a plan, we're being more directional so that staff can be more agile with adopting the recommendations. And lastly, we had approved a sports field and court strategy as part of the 2023 capital budget. So that is all encapsulated within the addendum. And I just want to state that in no way will this addendum replace the existing master plan. This is just going to be an addendum on the existing 2018 master plan. And as you can see here, about 90% of the action items have already been carried out. So staff will continue making strides on those. That's a brief timeline. You can see that we started the project kickoff back in Q3 of 2024, and we've done several analysis. We've done community engagement, and then we've adopted our final drafts. And now we're at council tonight to have this final plan adopted. And after that, we have a few next steps, which include the DC background study to further tell us how this Bill 23 is going to impact our development charges for Parks and Recreation, as well as beginning the implementation of those action items. I just want to start off by talking about the 2018 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So I have here the vision from the original plan, which we've still carried forward. So that vision was to inspire a lifetime of healthy opportunities and memorable experiences. And that was carried forward and used as an anchor when developing this addendum. And as you can see here, of the 171 action items and recommendations from the original plan, we've carried forward about 90% of them. So 20% of the items have been fully completed and 70% are in progress, with the others following afterwards. I want to draw the attention to some of the recent milestones. So number one, Woodman Park Community Center was finally reopened, and we had a big reopening event there. We won Landscape Ontario Award for Excellence for our work at Mohawk Park Playground. We completed the reopening of Dufferin Park, which is pictured here. We've allocated new pickleball courts and created a trail safety audit and a prioritized list of recommendations. And some of the things to look forward to from that Parks and Rec Master Plan are Southwest Community Center and Park, an indoor turf facility, and additional baseball diamonds. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on the Bill 23 impacts. They're detailed more specifically in the report, but a couple key points. Number one is that Bill 23's impact is that it effectively cuts the amount of parkland that we're able to obtain in half. Whereas before, developers would have to dedicate 1 hectare of parkland per 300 units. Now they're required to dedicate 1 hectare per 600. And that has big implications for us being able to have enough parkland to adequately meet the needs of our population. And number two, similarly, it effectively cuts the amount of cash in lieu of parkland we're able to collect from developers in half. So that's why this analysis was really key for us to understand how it's going to impact our Parks and Rec budget going forward. And if there are recommendations in policy and procedures that we can adopt to counteract these to ensure that our Parks and Rec is still healthy. Listed here is our engagement approach. So I won't go into much detail, but we did stakeholder and community engagement. We did an online scan of legislation. We did extensive data and document review of our existing documents of the city. We did a review of our comparator municipalities. And we did a public survey, which is detailed in the report as well. But all of that leads into the Parks and Rec Master Plan addendum and the findings that I'm going to present shortly. So what we heard, it was pretty similar across all of the wards. What we heard in terms of feedback, most of the respondents to the surveys and the community engagement had said that they're happy with the park's offerings overall, but there was one trend, which was the need for additional indoor swimming pools, which we've taken back and incorporated that into our recommendations as well. And some of our other comments that we received is that people would like to see increased lighting in our parks and trails due to accessibility and safety, as well as additional shade structures and seatings just for the age friendliness of the community. Maintaining some parks as naturalized spaces rather than actively programming all of our parks. There was a need for badminton programs and spaces that was identified, as well as a strong need for indoor turf, which was probably the biggest comment that we heard from our sports groups. So how are Brantford's parks doing? I just want to highlight here that we are doing quite well in terms of parkland per capita. We currently have 3.6 hectares of active parkland per 1,000 residents, which exceeds the majority of our comparative municipalities. We heard that people are happy with the cleanliness, community-focused design, and diverse programming. Some challenges were maintenance issues, overcrowding, insufficient shaded areas, and people wanted more outdoor amenities. And for future considerations, what we took back is how do we meet the needs of the growing community to make sure that we're still offering all those things that people need in the growth areas with the limited budget. So just another slide here showing how Brantford compares. I specifically wanted to point out the parkland per 1,000 residents here, which is, I think, a very important target. You can see Brantford is hovering at about 3.6 per 1,000 residents, which is quite high and exceeded only by Burlington from all of our other municipalities, which tend to hover around 2 to 3. So much so that the targets for a lot of these municipalities are around 3, which we're far exceeding. So Brantford is a leader in that category. And in terms of the other assets that are listed here, Brantford is doing well comparatively. The only area that I wanted to draw attention to was the indoor turf facilities, which Brantford does not have any currently, whereas other municipalities do. I'm going to get into a high-level review of the recommendations. So I'm going to start with the policies and procedures. So one of the recommendations you'll see from the report is adopting a land first policy, which prioritizes getting land before cash in lieu, noting that the value of land is greater than the value of cash, and the first priority should be to secure as much land as possible. Number 2 is embedding alternative funding strategies into our parks and recreation budget. At the city, we do have a grants program where we apply for grants regularly to offset the budget. However, this takes it a step further to look into opportunities for sponsorship, naming rights, and things of that nature to help to offset the capital costs. Some of the sports fields recommendations include enhancing underutilized baseball diamonds to spread the demand for baseball to some of those areas where people tend to not gravitate towards. And this could include adding lighting or seating or parking wherever possible. Investing in indoor turf to balance need for those sports that have seasonal demand. And increasing the supply of indoor pools, which I'll get a little bit more into. And for our parks, the 2 recommendations here are to create community interest and encourage community building. So what that means is not just creating cookie cutter parks and really creating things that people want to go to. And the last thing is developing a target, which we've developed as 500 meters of how far each resident should be from a park. And that's a much more accurate metric to follow rather than just looking at a map and seeing, does every ward have the equal amount of amenities across the board? We want to really focus on building where people are. So the next steps are to begin implementing the recommendations as early as 2025. So equipping some of our gymnasiums to be more multi-purpose would be a recommendation we can immediately adopt. And continuing plans for the indoor turf. We're going to continue developing plans for lighting to increase lighting in public places to make them more accessible and safe, as well as investing in shade structures. And lastly, there was a lot of engagement about pools and the need for indoor pools. So before going right to the recommendation to increase pools right away, we're going to do some community engagement to understand what the need is around pools. Do people need more programming, or is it that they're too far away from the existing pools? And how do we drive that demand for what we currently have? Rather than jumping to building new. I'm happy to take any questions.
Gagan, thank you for that report and presentation, both excellent. We're out of time. Andy, Councillor Samuel, could I ask you to move the resolution to place on the floor the separated items, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Tilburg, that all items for consideration and consent 6.1 and 6.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Thank you for that. So we are moving on now to item 6.1.1 for questions and discussion. Do we have speakers? Counselor Secoli.
Thank you, Chair McCreary. I do have one request of you, Goggin. Can you expand a little bit on the land first policy? Can you explain how it works now and how it's going to work after the changes take place?
Sure. Thanks, Counselor, for that question. I'm going to call on our consultant, actually Melissa, to maybe explain that first. And if we need more, we can turn it over to planning.
Sure, thank you. Sorry, it seems very loud. A couple of pieces around the land first policy. So first, I will be very frank in saying that this was adopted from the city of Guelph, who has done this as well. And the impetus behind a land first policy really is, to Guggen's point in the presentation, that the value of land has been growing much faster than the value of cash, meaning that in instances when working with developers and development opportunities, when should the city consider taking cash in lieu versus parkland dedication? And the land first policy is essentially to go with land first wherever feasible and where it makes sense. So for example, if you have development in your intensification corridor where maybe there's not a lot of land for parkland and perhaps you don't need additional parkland in that area, you might look to criteria to say, should we accept cash in lieu in this instance instead? But wherever possible, we should really be deferring to taking parkland dedication in lieu of cash. Hopefully that clarifies, but I'm happy to expand further if needed.
Understood. I kind of thought that's the way it worked now. So how does it work currently?
I'm happy to start, and then if Guggen or if the planning department wants more to say, please do. So currently, it depends, quite frankly. Cash in lieu is very valuable when looking to to maintain current parks. And so that is still seen as valuable. And as we went through the recommendations as well, there aren't alternative funding strategies that are being used by the Parks and Recreation Department currently. So this is where we look to see if we're not going to be accepting as much cash in lieu, what other opportunities do we need to look for funding? And so it's not necessarily that land is always first.
Okay, I think the proposed policy makes a lot of sense to me, so I'm happy to see us moving in that direction. Thank you for that explanation. And the last thing that I will leave staff with is I just want to flag Anderson Park as a location that would benefit from shade shelters as well as lighting. This is the discussion that we had begun with Kim, your predecessor, and we just never quite saw that through to finalization. So I do want to flag that when you're coming up with your priority list. Thank you so much for this report.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Carpenter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair McCreary. Gaina, thank you for an excellent. Did you lose me? Jeez.
Carry on, Counselor Carpenter.
Okay,
Still there?
Yes, I am. Sorry. Yeah, there. I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry, I don't know what happened with the connection there. Thank you for an excellent report. I wanted to talk about the land first policy as well. When I would like to see when there is an ability for the land to add a park for development, for example, intensification corridors is a good example. And I would like the funding that developers actually pay for cash in lieu of parkland to actually, because the idea of cash in lieu for parkland, as I understand it, is for providing a park space, amenity space for the development. And if you can't provide the actual park space, then what I would like to see is actually the funding that gets paid by the developer in lieu of parkland actually go in the neighborhood where the park already exists, so that the intensification of the population can enjoy the new amenities that are needed in that park, instead of going in a general fund and then being used in some other area where the intensification hasn't happened. I'd like us to make sure we consider those as priorities in some way. Otherwise, I think the report is excellent and I support it wholeheartedly. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Further discussion? Seeing none, we shall go to the vote.
Item 6.1.1 carried unanimously on recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Slash, Martin, McCreary, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Samwell.
Next up, we're going to go to item 6.13. Mayor, I'm having a hard time with people's names and titles today. Is it just me? Mayor Davis, would you please take the chair for this item?
Yes, I will. Chair McCreary. McCreary, right? Okay. So we understand we have a couple of amendments coming up. But first of all, anyone discuss this prior to receiving any amendments? Not seeing any raised hands. Councilor Caputo, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I want to say this was an absolutely great report. Great report when we had a discussion over it, and certainly made some changes that are certainly going to have an effect on the Balmoral Drive, as well as future impact with future development. Couple of things that I wanted to take out, which I think aren't needed. And that's hence why I wanted to put the amendments together. And that is the removal of the actual parking lines, which in my opinion kind of serve kind of like a bike lane, which I didn't want to have within the area. So I would appreciate having that removed, and listening to a lot of residents within the area when they received this report and mailed to them, that was their consensus going forward. The other thing also was the traffic calming.
First of all, so just make sure we understand what your amendment is. So is it to remove bike lanes from Balmoral Drive?
No, I'd like to speak to it first and then put my amendment to like highlight what those items are.
Well, I think you should give us the amendments first.
And then I'll give you the amendment first.
And be helpful if you could refer to Appendix A so we know exactly what we're dealing with.
Please. So this amendment is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Sloss. And the amendment being that the recommendation number 1 contained in section 911 to add designated parking lane lines on both sides of Balmoral Drive to assist in narrowing the roadway be removed. That recommendation number 7 and contained in section 911, removal all-way stop at Kent Road and install a traffic circle be repealed and replaced with remove stop signs on Balmoral Drive at Kent Road.
Okay, well, let's take them one at a time. So we've got recommendation 1. So that's to remove the designated parking lane lines, moved by yourself, second by Councillor Sluss. Discussion. Seeing none. Call the vote.
Okay, the amendment carried on a recorded vote of 8-2. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg. Those opposed, Councillor Samwell.
Second amendment.
Second amendment, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Sloss. Recommendation number 7 contained in section 911, removal all-way stop at Kent Road and install a traffic circle be repealed and replaced with remove stop signs on Balmoral Drive and Kent Road. Can I just speak to that for a second?
Certainly.
What I'd like, so basically, what I wanted replaced and taken out there was the actual, the traffic circle and the stop signs on Balmoral. The stop sign at Kent should still be intact, or it would just be a through street. But the removal of that 3-way stop should be in play because we have another 3-way stop at Oxford, which is basically 75 feet away. And I've been an advocate of removing that forever. So hopefully this will pass and will certainly make for a better situation. From a traffic circle perspective, I think moving forward, that is something that we should be addressing probably over the next 10 years as the Balmoral power line residential project takes place, where we're gonna need to look at something in order for us to be able to have from power line through into Ewing Drive, some type of restrictions in place to be able to keep traffic calmed.
And the rationale for taking out the roundabout?
Rationale for taking out the roundabout is actually, it looked great on paper until I drove it, and the actual roundabout is situated directly in front of two homes, which I believe is going to make it extremely difficult for the homeowners to be able to get in and out of their driveways without trying to hit that or anything along those lines. Usually a roundabout of that nature should probably take place at a four-way stop versus a three-way stop.
Councilor Van Tilburg.
Yes, I have a question for staff. These all-way stop signs that were at Kent Road in Balmoral, how long have they been there? Are they not fairly recent?
Good evening through the mayor, David Ferguson, manager of traffic services. The stop sign has been there since the year 2000.
And both stop signs? As an all-way stop?
That's correct.
And so then it must
Oxford
be,
is 2022.
it's Oxford, so they're side by each. So am I to understand then, because Oxford's there, the one at Balmoral, the one at Kent is not required?
Through the chair, that's correct. It's actually not warranted.
It's not warranted now, but it was at the time. Would that be correct?
Through the chair, we suspect that it was actually put in place to provide for a crossing point for school children. There's a number of schools in the area. So we suspect that was the reason for it.
Was there a traffic report done on the Oxford Balmoral stop sign?
Through the chair, yes, it was.
Okay, so my question then is, with us removing stop signs right now, is there any liability?
Through the chair, that would be a question I think would have to go to legal. We review them obviously from the traffic industry standards. And if we identify that something is not warranted, then I don't see how there would be any impact on the municipality.
What I was just saying is you've recommended a traffic circle. There's an amendment to remove a stop sign. I just want to make sure that we are not legally putting ourselves in jeopardy by arbitrarily removing a stop sign. I'm no traffic expert.
Through the chair, so that there are, as I mentioned, standards in the Ontario traffic manuals. That stop sign would actually fall below the actual standards for spacing. I believe the recommended spacing between traffic measures is approximately 200 meters. So it does obviously fall below that. Is not a requirement.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Sless. Councilor Sless, you're muted.
My apologies. For those that are not familiar with the area, there's two all-way stops that are about 75 feet apart, which really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I guess back in the day when they were installed, it made sense. But today it just doesn't make sense. That if you were shifting gears, you wouldn't get out of first gear and you'd be stopping again. So it doesn't make sense. This will help the flow of traffic, and it certainly doesn't incur any safety concerns, at least from my perspective and from traffic's perspective, because they've agreed and are suggesting that it come down. So I think it's the right thing to do. It'll get traffic moving a little better in that area, and it's taking a stop sign out where a stop sign really wasn't needed.
Yeah, I'll call the vote. Oh, sorry, Councilor Caputa, do you want to second speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess I was always adamant about taking one of the stop signs out. And the reason why Kent seemed logical was because Oxford is more of a through street, in my opinion at the time, so that it literally led you from Oxford through Dunstan and brings you all the way to Gretzky, where Kent basically is just the stop route between Balmoral and King George. And the other logic behind keeping the Oxford sign, stop signs, was the fact that we are actually going to be moving the bus out, according to Mr. Spicer, we'll be moving off of Kent Road and onto Oxford, again, which is a smaller section to take a bus through, which is a little more commercial than running through a residential area with the school. Oxford Street has some residences, but certainly has a building supply, a plaza, and a Pioneer gas station, and brings you to the same location. So that was the logic behind that.
Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank Councilor Caputo and Councilor Sless for advocating so wisely on behalf of their ward residents. I always support the ward councilors. They've made some good recommendations here. And I always support the ward councilors because they know the ward best. So, and I will do so here again today. Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the vote then on that amendment.
Thank you. And the second amendment to 6.1.3 carried on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councilors Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Samwell.
So this has now been amended twice. Any other discussion? Councilor Sless? On the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to thank staff. There was a very comprehensive review of that corridor that was done. There were close to 1,000 flyers distributed to the residents that were affected, and very little pushback on the recommendations coming forward from staff. So it appears as though we've got a win here. The neighborhood is happy with what's being proposed for the most part. For I guess extremely heavy in favor of. So I'm certainly pleased to support this as it's amended, and I think it does leave the door open in the future as things start to develop on the northern portion of Balmoral. When we get up closer to Powerline Road, then perhaps we can revisit, and there might be alternative things that need to be done once that traffic comes on board. But for right now, I think it's in good shape. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, call the vote.
Item 6.1.3 as amended carried on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councilor Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Samwell.
So Councilor McCreary, back to you as Chair McCreary, and I think you're going to be going to 6.1.7.
Thanks for looking up to that for me, Mayor. That was most appreciated. Councilor Martin, this is your item. Would you like to go ahead, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment. Do you want me to move that now?
Why not?
Okay. The proposed amendment would add section C, that any existing mid-sized T-hanger with power tenants be grandfathered into the 2025 rate, $509.27 per month, and to include inflationary increases in 26 and 27. And the reason for this is the increase that's being proposed by staff is a 20% increase, which is a very large increase for existing tenants to swallow. And I think by phasing it in and grandfathering existing tenants, we can keep them happy, as well as increase the rates on the T-hangers as they become vacant and as the new ones are constructed, because we have new T-hangers coming online this year, and we'll get the higher rate for those from the get-go, and the existing tenants will get a break from a 20% increase.
Councilor, could you remind us who your seconder is, please? Councilor Secoli, thank you. Okay. Discussion on the amendment, folks. Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. Did you wish to jump in, Councilor?
I just had a quick
Go ahead,
question.
please.
What's a power tenant? I don't know if it's been a long month for me or I'm just.
Through the chair to Councilor Secoli, Ray Petro, manager of real estate. That just refers to the hangars that have power. We do have hangars at the airport that are manual doors.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
That sounds like a lot of work. Mayor Davis on the amendment.
Question for staff. How did you arrive at that dollar amount, the 20% increase?
Through the chair to Mayor Davis, we looked at comparative airports in Southern Ontario, as well as bridging the gap between the cost of our medium-sized T hangars with power and our large-sized T hangars with power. So between those two factors, we came up with that amount.
So this amendment would then have some tenants paying less than market rate?
Through the chair, ultimately, yes. Its goal is to grandfather essentially the existing tenants at this rate, and then allow the new tenants coming in to pay the new rate. So essentially, there'd be two different costs to the same product.
All right, so Mr. Chair, I'm not going to vote in favor of this. I would prefer an amendment that says that brings the rent for these units up to this market rent, but phase it in over 3 years rather than just leaving the current rent in place and just adding inflation. So,
Mayor, are you introducing an amendment to the amendment?
no, I think we have to vote on this one first. And if it passes, fine, it's done. If it's not, then I would probably be bringing a different amendment forward.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see, who do we have next? I'm sorry, gentlemen, I didn't notice whose hand went up first, so I will pick Councillor Carpenter. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To staff then, as you read this amendment, would you see that amendment meaning that those particular hangars will remain at the lower rate and only have the inflation rate index added to them in perpetuity? Or do you see that as if one of the tenants moves out and it's re-rented at the upper market rent, same as the rest? How do you see this amendment directing you going forward?
So through the chair to Councillor Carpenter, a little bit of both. As existing tenants remain, they would be subject to the already approved inflationary rates of 3% up until the 2027 budget, at which time staff would review the long-term budget that we did last year or 2 years ago now. And again, if any of those T hanger tenants were to vacate, then we would advertise that exact same T hanger at the new rate, subject to the same inflationary adjustments up until 2027.
No, thank you for that clarity.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Van Tilburg, you're next in the queue. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, how long have the tenants been there? Because I'm a little uncertain about subsidizing market rate tenants.
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilburg, some of our tenants have been there long-term, others are relatively new. I don't have the exact tenancies in front of me now.
Well, in a way, I kind of feel, it's one thing if you've been there 20 years, it's another thing if you've been there less than 5. And if we're being under market rate, it's not jiving with me. We should be able to get market rate from these units. Now, how is the 3% inflationary rate chosen? Does that fluctuate?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilburg, that was a number that was chosen by our finance department when we did our 4-year budget.
All right. Yeah. How many of these are there that are at the 509?
Through the chair, we have 30 medium-sized hangars with power.
So that's a lot of units.
Yeah, it makes up the majority of our 47 units.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to support this now. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And through you to staff, what are we not building mid-sized T hangars because there is such a demand for them?
Through the chair to the councillor, we are building an additional 37 hangars, 5 of which will be extra large hangars that will fit float planes, and there's a demand for that. And the additional hangars will be our large hangars with power, which will fit larger airplanes. And we're anticipating that market growing.
Okay, so we're not actually increasing our inventory of the mid-size hangars.
Through the chair, no, we only have 7 of the large ones, so we're increasing the large inventory right now.
Okay. And so I'm assuming we have 0 vacancy of mid-size hangars.
That is correct.
And do we have a waiting list of people that are interested in mid-size hangars?
Yeah, through the chair, we do. And that's where this recommendation comes from as well, is supply and demand.
Okay, and so again, I'm certainly not going to support subsidizing anybody below the market rate when it shows just from my questions that there's a demand for the mid-size hangars, even at the market rate. So thank you.
Also, thank you. Question, Mr. Petro, how many are on the wait list?
The wait list, to be honest, is a floating list. We have certain tenants that are waiting for specific sized hangars. We have others that are waiting for anything they can get, but some that don't even respond to us. So right now we have a floating list of about 20, but it changes at all times.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sicoli, go ahead, please.
Just one last quick question. When was the last rate increase for these current tenants?
Through the chair, they increase every year through our fees and charges bylaw.
Sorry, not standard inflationary, but actually adjusted for.
Through the chair, I'm unaware of my predecessor, his predecessor ever raising the rate substantially. Perhaps someone else on staff that's been here longer can answer that, but I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you.
We shall go to the question on the amendment. Oh, Councillor Martin, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The part of the problem with this whole report is the current rate is actually in line with comparators for the most part. The majority of comparators fall in the same kind of range. To say that we're subsidizing these hangars, I don't think is correct. And traditionally, the increase for these hangars has been 3% a year, even when inflation was running closer to 2%. So call it an inflationary increase isn't quite accurate. It's been higher than inflation a number of times. It might have been lower when inflation jumped up to 6%, but that was an anomaly. I'm not sure what our increase was that year. It might have been higher than the 3%, but going back a good number of years, the increase has been higher than inflation. And like I say, the comparators fall in line pretty much with the rate that we want to grandfather at. So I think it's appropriate to do this. It's a big increase for existing tenants who planned on a particular rate, and understanding inflationary increases are normal, but a 20% increase in 1 year is a bit much. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. That does lead me to ask another question. Do we know what our carrying cost and operating cost is for a hangar of this size?
So through the chair, we do cover the cost of the hydro as well as the property taxes. So these rates do include their hydro as well as the property taxes, as well as we don't charge any additional fees to our T hangar tenants to utilize the airport and the taxiways, which also require maintenance.
Thank you for that. But in terms of what our capital cost is, our payment for debentures that we may have entered into, apportioned over our operating costs at the airport, do we have an idea of what it costs us to operate one of those hangars for a month? Would it be less than $509?
Through the chair, it'd be much less than $509, but I don't have that figure. It's one hydro bill that's kind of split up.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Petro. I tend to agree with Councillor Martin. I think we've got long-term customers here to whom we have some degree of responsibility to treat fairly. I see the increase is pretty significant. And, you know, we've seen lately a couple of instances where other companies in the community have suffered drastically because of significant increases to their operating costs or simply being priced out of the market. So I'm going to support this today. I think this is reasonable. We don't lose money on this. We're not subsidizing. We're simply respecting the clientele that we have in-house now and passing on to them what is a reasonable yearly increase due to inflation. So I will support it. I see, okay, Councilor Carpenter, you're up. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question to staff. Are all staff's costs and staff's time being paid for airport revenue, or are the taxpayers paying for that?
Through the chair, the airport staff does not go on the airport budget specifically.
So it's funded by the taxpayer.
Through the chair, yeah, I think all staff is funded by the taxpayer, yes.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Van Tilburg.
I was wondering if I can have an amendment to the amendment. Is that in order?
Let's hear it in your seconder and I'll rule.
Okay, well, hearing it is, I'd like to have the amendment as written, but with the provision to have it over a 3-year period reach the market rate of 6.1127 or whatever that might be within the 3 years. In other words, it will progressively get them all to the market rate over a period of time instead of in one hit.
There's a seconder for that.
Seeking a seconder.
I see none. It fails. Sorry, Councilor Van Tilburg. Okay.
Can I comment on the proposed amendment, Mr. Chairman?
Do you think I can't count to 3?
I was going to suggest that if we changed it from 3 years to 5 years, I would consider that friendly.
I would do so.
Seconder.
A seconder.
Seconder? Who's the seconder? Councilor Squally. It's all up to you.
I
No
was
pressure.
gonna call a point of order because I think the amendment is contradictory to what the original amendment is.
You seem to have worked that out, though. Will you agree to the friendly amendment?
No, because I think
Okay.
it should be 3 years.
All right.
Seeking a seconder to the 5 years.
There is none.
Thank you.
Point of order. I thought it was, is this a friendly amendment on the floor or not?
It was, it's refused by the seconder.
By the seconder, good.
Yes.
Okay. So if I might speak to the amendment? It's on the floor.
There's no amendment on.
There.
Councilor Martin's amendment is on the floor.
Correct, that's what I want to speak to.
How many
I've
times
got
have you
it-
spoken?
I've got it straight.
I've counted
I've
one.
only spoken once.
Okay, you go ahead, Mayor. please.
So I suggest the easiest way to deal with this is if you don't agree with this and you want it phased over 3, vote this down, vote in the negative. And I guarantee you, I will bring forward a different amendment that phases it over 3 years so that they will attain the full rental rate in the year 2028.
Thank you for that. Now we are going to the vote on the amendment.
Thank you. And the amendment lost on a recorded vote of 4 to 7. Those opposed, Mayor Davis, Councilor Sokoli, Sullivan, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samuel. Those in favor, Councilor Caputo / Martin McCreary.
The resolution is on the floor. Mayor, how many times have you spoken to this? You spoke once to the amendment? Once on the main motion? I think you're good to
I
go.
want to put another amendment on. the
You
floor.
go right ahead. Who's your
Okay.
seconder?
Councilor Secoli, I think.
Councilor Sokoli, okay.
She's got to hear it first.
You can read the amendment, please.
Yeah. So I'm allowed to put an amendment on the floor? I think I am. If we extend the patience, I can actually say.
Now,
what
did
the
I
amendment
pick on
is.
you like this in the earlier meeting? I don't believe I did. Go ahead, please.
I could say something about that, but I won't. So my amendment is seeking a seconder that for the current tenants, that the increase to this market rent level would be phased in over 3 years so that the objective would be by the year 2028, they would be paying the same rent as the new market or the new tenants. So just phasing it over 3 years.
Councilor Sokoli, are you seconding that? Thank you. Is there discussion on this new amendment? Let's go to the vote quickly.
Thank you. And that amendment carried on a recorded vote of 9-2. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Slash, Martin, McCreary, Van Tilburg, Samuel. Those opposed, Councillors Hunt and Carpenter.
Thank you for that. So before us now is the original amendment once amended. Sorry, the original resolution once amended. Further discussion? Seeing none, we shall go to the vote.
And item 6.1.7 as amended carried on a unanimously on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Slash, Martin, McCreary, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Samuel.
Thank you. Mayor Davis, you requested 6.2.1 to be separated. The floor is all yours, sir.
Thank you, Chair McCreary. So what we have before us, members of the public, is this is the 2024 annual summary report for the City of Brantford drinking water system. So it has contained within it a lot of detailed scientific data on our water system, various testing measures and water pressure measures. And I would suggest, Mr. Chair, this is an extremely important report because we each have personal liability, not corporate liability. We each have personal liability when it comes to our water system. And I think we got an excellent water system. But I've got one question before I go to nitrates. And that is, when I went through the report, I actually went through all of the data, the laboratory data, and there was reference to sodium. And although the sodium levels are less than what's allowed by regulation, in fact, they're about a quarter of what is the maximum permitted by regulation. There's a comment that something about an adverse result, even though substantially less than the regulatory maximum. What's that about? Selby.
Good evening, Sylvie Conguera, Director of Environmental Services, through you, Mr. Chair. So the sodium it's an aesthetic objective. It is not a drinking water limit per se. So it's just that because of the taste, it's an objective of 200 milligrams per liter. So if we are over a certain limit of 20 milligrams per liter, then the water could taste different. And also some residents who are on dialysis may want to know because they're controlling sodium levels. So that's the notification here on sodium.
That makes sense. But on average, the levels are about 50 milligrams per liter. Is that?
That's correct through you, Mr. Chair. That's correct.
Okay. Now I want to move to nitrates. And on the nitrates, we did have a report earlier this year with nitrates in our drinking water. There is a concern if we get anywhere close to 10 milliliters or whatever, that then can trigger a bottled water advisory. And if I recall correctly, on New Year's, because of some very unusual weather conditions, nitrate levels in the river rose to pretty close to 9. So getting uncomfortably close to 10. All right. So our current water treatment system does not remove nitrates from the water.
Through you, Mr. Chair. That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
And we did give approval for the installation of a sort of a temporary reverse osmosis system, which would remove nitrate from the city's drinking water to some degree.
That's correct.
And do I understand correctly that today the reverse osmosis unit was delivered and hooked into our water system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the unit is delivered. We still have to make all the connections and trial out before we actually put the water through the system. So that's the process we're working on this week, but we are excited to receive the units today.
Well, I was very excited with that. Do we actually have a picture of this unit coming into the water treatment plant? Folks, there it is, the reverse osmosis unit. So, Selby, what In addition to, now this won't treat all of our water. I think you told us if this particular unit and the other one that's coming with it will treat about 30% of our drinking water.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
All right. And how long will we have this in place? They're expensive to rent.
So this is a rental unit. We're going to have it for 3 months. We rent it for 3 months because usually we see high levels of nitrate in the winter months. So we rent it for 3 months.
And so what kind of testing program, measurement program are you doing now, or your staff doing now, and will do once the unit's in place to demonstrate what the impact of the reverse osmosis unit is, or will be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, obviously the main parameter is nitrate. We want to see before and after the reverse osmosis unit, how much we are removing. And then we also want to measure a few more parameters just to see how the units are working, what's the quality of the drinking water, and obviously the quantity of water produced by these units. All of these will be measured.
Right. And what other nutrients, contaminants, whatever you want to call them, what else will it remove from the drinking water that's not currently removed by our standard water treatment system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, obviously after the trial, we can give you more information, but pretty much the unit removes all kinds of minerals like sodium and calcium and magnesium, and all of those are removed. Pretty much like a 90% of it is removed by the reverse osmosis. But as we go through for our water, we'll test before and after to see what's being removed.
Will we actually have soft water?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the water coming out of the reverse osmosis will be soft, but we have to adjust it to adjust what we call pH and things like that to make sure the water is same as it's drinkable, I should say.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Sylvia, you and your staff for doing this. I look forward to seeing the data results.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, thank you. Selby, would there be an opportunity, do you think, for the mayor to pay a visit and produce perhaps a video of how this interacts with our plant?
To you, Chair, of course. We just want to make sure it's all established, and then
I'm not suggesting you let him make the connections. No, thank you. Councillor Carpenter, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And thank you for an in-depth report, Selby. I really do appreciate it. I do know that we have one of the best water treatment plants in the province, and we won awards for our work here. Are we planning on the reverse osmosis to be a permanent process going down in the future, Selby?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that is reverse osmosis. We want to have it as a permanent treatment process, but it takes few years to design and install it. So we have these rental unit for the winter month, and it's also used as a pilot process to test how the reverse osmosis is working for our water. So when we design the permanent system, we can use this data.
And my understanding is the Grand River is a very difficult river for water to be treatable and to be potable, and we've been able to manage to do that for many, many years. Would that be a fair statement? Yeah. Okay. And one more final question, Mr. Chair, if I may. Selby, because in the report, it's got a picture of us digging up a water main. We've had a lot of water main breaks lately. Is that are we at the normal amount of water main breaks? Are we above average? Where are we when it comes to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have more water main breaks this year, just due to the weather. So usually we have a range of 20 to 30 main breaks we see every year. This year is high. We still have a few more months to go, but we are seeing more main breaks just because of the weather.
And that's because of the shifting of the ground with the cold and freeze and thaw and the movement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, and thank you for you and your staff. They do a fantastic job. Very impressed with you. I'm very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
We shall go to the vote on this.
Thank you. Item 6 6.2.1 carried on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councilors Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Celeste, McCurry, Hunt, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Samwell.
And Mayor Davis, you have the floor for the double header on water, 6.2.2.
Right, so now we'll go to the other end of the water system and wastewater operations. I think we all know that we have an award-winning department. Often they're winning gold awards. They won the gold in 2023. Sylvie, when will we find out that who is going to be winning the gold medal for 2024? When do they make those announcements?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Mayor, we unofficially, we do know that we have the gold award for 2024. We should know in a couple of months officially.
So do they do a presentation, kind of like the Academy Awards? So I guess the answer is no, but that's great news that I really am proud of our wastewater operations staff. I mean, right now they're attaining gold medal status with a facility where some of the equipment is clearly out of date. Now we have it in our capital plan to make some very significant improvements, capital improvements to our plant over the next 5 years. That's good news. But my question for you, Sylvie, is 4 or 5 years ago, we had a problem with wastewater pumping stations, because in our wastewater collection system, we rely on pumping stations to pump the wastewater over gaps and up hills and things like that. What is the current condition of, I think it's 10, is it not 10 wastewater pumping stations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
All right. And we spent a lot of money upgrading some of those pumping stations.
That's correct.
All right. What's the current status of the 10 wastewater?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we have 10 pumping stations, like you said, Mr. Mayor, for all the pumping stations. We have a plan. It's not like, okay, I'm going to upgrade the station this year kind of a thing. We prepare a plan once every 5 years. What is the capacity of the station? What is the age of the station? Any parts that are either need to come into compliance with the code or need to degraded, we need to replace. All of those are evaluated and put on a program every year. So we are on top of all the pumping stations to make sure they are operating at the capacity that it should be, and where needed, we have upgrades in the plan. For example, MP pumping station, we need that station for the growth in the north. So that upgrades is ongoing and expect to be completed in 2026.
Well, again, thank you, Sylvia. It is somewhat mundane, but it is a very basic service, core service that we provide here at the city. I think our staff do an excellent job. And I think you'll let them know that we here at council and mayor as well, that we're very pleased with their work in making sure we have a very efficient, well-operated, well-maintained wastewater system.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council. Our staff are very much appreciative of that. This goes a long way.
Mayor, thank you. Councilor Carpenter, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I agree with the mayor wholeheartedly there. Sylvie, what's the average cost of replacing a pumping station or rebuilding a pumping station? It's in the millions, is it not?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct, Councilor Carpenter. Depending on the size of the station, it could go anywhere from $10 million to $30-40 million, depending on the, right, like I said, size.
So it's very expensive. So in the first time a pumping station is built, isn't it, if it's required for development, the developer pays for that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. First time serving a subdivision, the developer pays for it.
And then after that, the taxpayer pays for it, and they're in their water bill, really.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the ratepayer pays, yes, the ratepayer pays water through water and wastewater rate. The revenue is collected to maintain those stations.
So when we target our planning, how we're going to plan on our expansion of our municipality, shouldn't that be a priority item that we try and build where we can have less pumping stations so we have less cost to the ratepayer in the future?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is a complicated question. I mean, let me simplify it. The need for the pumping station changes depending on where the location is. For example, if you're in a low-lying area, you got to lift the wastewater. So there's no way you can develop that area without a pumping station. But if you're in an elevated area, you probably don't need a pumping station. You can discharge by gravity. So the
Yes.
need for a pumping station depends on where they are.
Yeah, okay, so just thank you, Salvi, appreciate that. So just final comment then. So when council thinks about things, if we were to provide sewer services west of the city, which is uphill, we wouldn't need pumping stations, that we just get revenue from those using the pumping stations, even if it wasn't within our municipality, and we wouldn't have to worry about pumping stations in the future. So thank you for all your work you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councilor Martin, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Salvi, one of the capital projects listed is the addition of the combined heat and power project. Will we be able to utilize the gas at the gas utilization facility? Will we run one engine on the biogas and the other on the landfill, or how's that going to work?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Martin, that's something we are working on it at this time, at the design stage. If we, I don't want to say yes or no. I mean, it's, we have to figure out what is the right approach. If we use one engine for, say, for landfill gas and one engine for digester gas, then there's no redundancy, right? So we want to see what is the best approach to meet the needs of the approval agencies. But we are working currently to send the digester gas to the landfill gas facility and generate electricity from it.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Councilor, thank you. And we shall go to the question on this.
Thank you. Item 6.2.2 carried unanimously on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Councillor Samuel, Tilbark, Hunt, Carpenter, McCurry, Martin, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Secolia, and Mayor Davis.
We have no resolutions before us this evening. Councilor Van Tilburg, I understand you have been busy preparing notices of motion. Would you like to read the titles, please?
Waiving of certain planning application fees for 83 Port Street and Town and Gown. And just let me pull it up if it will. Town and Gown Advisory Committee.
Thank you for that. That concludes our business this evening, and we are adjourned. Thank you for being here or